introductions of who we are and what we do. So I guess I'll start with myself. I'm Jasmine McKenzie. I'm a senior here, and I run the Seeds of Peace program here, South Portland. I'm what they call a PS, which is a peer support or a paradigm shifter. They just like to use big fancy words. But I just help get things done around here for Seeds. It's really like a group effort. I just kind of push them along. So yeah, that's what I do. And Seeds helped with this presentation, so that's why I'm here.
I'm Ella. I'm, I guess, also a senior. I'm the Amnesty president at this school. And so for people who don't know what Amnesty is, well, it's a really big international program that we have a chapter of here as a club. And our basic thing is that we stand up and protect the rights of those who can't do it for themselves, specifically like human rights. So, yeah.
Hi, I'm Ellen. I'm a senior. I'm in Amnesty International, and I went to CCPs.
I'm Grace. I'm a junior in Amnesty.
I'm Julia. I'm a senior. I'm in Amnesty, and I went to CCPs.
I'm Robin. I'm a senior, and I'm in Amnesty.
I'm Katie. I'm a senior, and I'm in Amnesty.
I'm Erica. I'm a junior. I'm in Amnesty, and I went to Seeds of Peace.
You know me already. I also am in Amnesty. And now we're going to start. Just to give you a little background on why we did this, we were having a meeting and we're trying to figure out what we wanted to do with our time as an Amnesty group. And I was like, well, we could have a dialogue, which is what Seeds does, and it's a big conversation. And they were like, well, about what? And it just tumbled, and now we're here. So we're gonna present to you on the hashtag Water is Life and just the idea of human rights rights to water, especially in the U.S. And we're gonna have a conversation or a dialogue afterwards. So we kind of meshed the two groups together, which is super cool. And I hope you like it and you learn something. And we hope by the end of this presentation that you agree with us that water is a human right and not a privilege.
So, water is everywhere, but only 2.5% of Earth's water is consumable on its own. A third of people on Earth are unable to access the clean water they need, and the number of people without water is growing really fast. And at this rate, it's expected that by 2025, 1.8 billion people will be living in regions with absolute water scarcity, and more than 2/3 of Earth's population could be struggling to get all the water they need. The map above shows areas where fresh water is scarce. 1.2 billion people have lost access to fresh water due to climate change, deforestation, increased populations, and urbanization. And this is called the physical scarcity, which can be seen in the lighter blue areas on the map. On top of this, 1.6 billion people lack the necessary facilities needed to sanitize their waters because their countries lack the necessary resources to implement a water cleaning system. These areas are shown in the dark blue on the map.
So according to the United Nations Development Program, access to fresh water is a basic human right, which makes sense because you need it to live and stay alive. And you can only survive without water for a week at most. And it's also really important for hygiene. The World Health Organization estimates that a person needs 20 liters of water per day for basic hygiene, and 40% of the world's inhabitants have insufficient fresh water for minimal hygiene, which is almost half the world. Not only that, but by 2025, it's estimated that over half the world's nations will be facing freshwater stress or shortages, and by 2050, 75% of the world's population will be facing freshwater scarcity. According to International Alert, there are 47 countries in which combined there are 2.7 billion people that are at risk of violent conflict from water-related crises, which is about 37% of the world population.
Alright, so this map on top in gray and black is about access to fresh water. The areas in black are where families currently can't afford their water bills, and the areas in gray are where families are at risk for not being able to afford water bills in the near future. And the map in color below this is a map of poverty across America, and you can see the darker red areas are where there's a higher concentration of people living in poverty. And you can see that access to clean water and poverty often go hand in hand, which may seem obvious because it's harder to afford water when you have less money. But also, the point of me comparing these two maps for you is because these poorer communities as a whole can't afford their clean water, and right now a lot of affording water in our country is on a local level. And so clearly these places don't have what they need, and we need more state and federal programs and help to get clean water for everyone and not just leave it up to the individual payer. So another thing about our country is that we do have a Clean Water Act from 1972. It regulates the standards of quality for water and regulates how you can dump pollutants into water. In the 70s, there were a lot of factories that were starting to dump pollutants into water from pipes or ditches without really anyone controlling how much or where they could do it, and it was contaminating the water for the animals and for people drinking it. So this bill was put into place by our federal government. Alright, so now I'm going to talk about one particular political issue with water in our country today, which is the situation in Flint, Michigan. First, to give you a sense of the population there are about 100,000 people. 41% of them are living below the poverty line, and 56.6% of them are African American. And historically, this town used to have a big General Motors factory plant, but when it downsized, this led to an economic decline for the community as a whole and a lot of the families in the region. So this issue began in April 2014 when a decision was made by the government to switch the city to using the Flint River as water source off of the Detroit water source and to this river. And this river historically had a lot of pollutants dumped in it by the factory from General Motors. So there are some test results that kind of are evidence for why this water source is dirty. It had 7 times the EPA, which is Environmental Protection Agency, limit for lead and bacteria levels. A Virginia Tech study from 2015 found 13,200 parts per billion of lead, which is a lot. 5,000, which is less than half that, is considered hazardous waste. So this is water that people were expected to drink and shower in. And also in 2015, a study found that 40% of homes in Flint had elevated lead levels in their water. So in sort of solving this issue or trying to solve this issue, the City Council of Flint voted to reconnect to Detroit water in March of 2015. But the state emergency manager vetoed this vote and said that the switch would be too expensive and not actually safer. On the next slide, I'll have a picture comparing Flint water to Detroit water, and I think we'll be able to agree that the Detroit water is safer. Also in 2015, about 7 months after this veto, they did decide to switch back to Detroit water after more evidence of the lead levels in the water was discovered, and they declared a state of emergency in the region. So the blame for this has been placed on various people during certain lawsuits. The people in Flint the state, the NAACP, and the ACLU, which sticks up for civil rights, have all filed charges, and they filed them against the state of Michigan, against the EPA, and against specific officials in Flint who basically knew about the issue with the water and decided not to switch back and decided not to publicize the issue or make it well known or fight for the people of Flint. So in 2016, some officials were officially charged on this charge, and also just a couple months ago in February, the Michigan Civil Rights Commission declared that institutional racism contributed to the decision to use the Flint River and save money. No one is trying to say that there is lead in the water because of racism, but the point is that the pipes haven't been updated and the people in charge have ignored the situation, partly because our governmental system privileges white people, and this is a predominantly African American town. So as far as the resolution of this issue goes, in March the EPA gave Flint money to upgrade their water infrastructure, and the federal government settled more money to replace the lead pipes. So there is progress coming in the future, but as of right now, there has been no fix made. There are still children with health defects that they need money for their medical bills, and there have not been settlements for that yet. And as a whole, the community of Flint has suffered a setback from this situation. So there's the Flint water next to the Detroit water like I was talking about. You can kind of see that it's very dirty. And in case you didn't know, lead is really not healthy or safe to drink for a human being or an animal. And there's also the picture of a Flint water tower and a picture of a protester, because the other thing about the Flint issue is that it has inspired a lot of protests in the region and across the country of people sticking up for these citizens who we believe deserve fresh water that they can drink and use for their families safely.
Another situation in America right now that has received a lot of media attention in general is the Dakota Access Pipeline. So the pipeline, the proposed route is in red on the map, and so it's across the Midwest. The group that is building it is called Energy Transfer Partners. So a couple years ago, they met with the Sioux Standing Rock tribe. And their reservation is kind of in light gray, you can kind of see, and then the specific location where some of the protests are in a little box. Anyway, so they met with the Sioux to like kind of talk through it because the pipeline was going to go through their lands. The tribe strongly opposed it, as you may imagine, because the pipeline was going to cross a lake that most of their water comes from. So oil and water don't often go well together. And so there were worries of spills and water contamination, as well as worries about the pipeline and construction going across sacred sites for Native American burial grounds and other artifacts. And so it would break some land agreements and treaties from a while ago. So in 2016, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which was a group that was working to build it and like kind of analyzing what would be the best route, was trying to figure out how it could, if it was actually going to affect Native American lands. The senior archaeologist determined that though there were like five actual cultural sites like on the route that would be affected, and 30 more if you added a 1 mile radius, that there were no historic properties that would be subject to effect if it went under the lake. So the construction moved forward, and that's when a lot of controversy began, because the tribe felt that they weren't adequately spoken to, and like though they had concerns, there wasn't any really procedure that addressed their concerns, or really any evidence to why that this was still allowed, even though there was only evidence going against it. So things were starting to brew. Later in the year, the plan was officially approved. So the tribe, because of the decision, asked for the government to survey the land in more depth. And the government kind of told the Army Corps to play nice and work with the tribe. So it was starting to look a little better, but later in the year, the plan was approved without any change. And so the tribe, in response, sued the Army Corps because they felt like they weren't considered or properly approached in the situation, and it violated some acts, like National Historical Preservation Acts. In addition, and then back to, there was a countersue from the Dakota Access LLC, which is part of the Energy Transfer. So they countersued them because they were kind of in the way of the construction, which has been broadcast a lot. And so I'm sure you've seen lots of that. Later on in September, there was lots of legal action happening in court. So the Sioux presented to the court that the ETP completely demolished tribal areas and burial sites with a bulldozer, and then that's when protests started to become more violent. Private security guards and dogs and water were sent in to subdue people, and so construction was stopped for a little bit, and National Guard was sent in to kind of help keep things under control, but that didn't necessarily make it better or more under control, escalated the violence. So the construction kept going. In October, and 27 protesters were arrested. And then the tribe kept petitioning the government to investigate the situation because they felt like the response of the government was over dramatic and militarized and over violent on the response. And so in November, Obama became vocal about this, and he said that the Army Corps was trying to figure out how to accommodate all the needs and try to kind of reroute the pipeline. At this point, tear gas started to be used on demonstrators, and it got really cold, so the government asked protesters to leave, claiming because of the weather. Many people think that it was mostly to get people out of the way to keep building, but the actual reason apparently was to the weather. So a couple days later in December, the construction stopped again because it was still going, just not in that area, to consider the impact more as a whole and to kind of give the public opinion and a chance to comment on the proposed plan. Once President Trump was inaugurated in January, he passed an executive order to get the pipeline, the construction to be approved again and to keep going. It was approved in February, and there was no promised public comment session. Like, it was promised, but it didn't happen. And building began in February. There was some more legal action with the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe getting involved and requesting a restraining order and kind of trying to sue each other more, but it was denied. The judge denied it because there wasn't water or oil flowing through the pipes. So he's kind of said, stand by and wait till oil goes and keep giving updates. Basically, the judge, in conclusion, said that there wasn't going to be any interference with the pipeline, with the oil, and there weren't going to be any environmental issues in oil, like it wasn't going to be involved with the tribe. Though in March, there were 2 incidents that leaked 100 gallons of oil. No, it didn't go into the water, and it didn't affect the people or wildlife because it was contained pretty quickly, and it was like an issue with an above-ground valve, so it was below ground, it might have been a bigger issue. The company's kind of denying that it was very bad because there wasn't a lot of impact this time, but it still goes to show how it's not even completed, and there's still already 100 gallons spilled. And so that was not very publicized at first because the company was not required to tell the public about the spill because the health department is only required to inform the public and the people affected if the spill is greater than 150 gallons. So 100 is still a pretty significant amount of oil. And so that was found only because it was kept in public record, but not really not shared, not like a big effort to make people aware of that. So then we have some pictures on the next slide. And so the right picture is the construction of the pipeline. On the left, upper left, we have some pictures of protesters interacting with law enforcement, some water being split up protesters. And below that, there's another protest of the tribe members marching to defend their water and their sacred burials.
Okay, I'm going to talk about the effects of lead and oil on the environment. Specifically, I'm going to focus on people, because sometimes we forget to mention the effects of things like this on people. We're focused on the wildlife and environment, which are really important. I'm not trying to say they're not, but I wanted to focus today on what stuff like this can do to you and people around you. Because unfortunately, just in our brains, we tend to like put more importance on like human beings than like, I don't know, like ecology or like wildlife. So I'm trying to like play to that today. And I'm also going to talk about the wildlife as well, but mostly humans. So lead. In Flint, the water has lead, as everyone has talked about today. And I just want to talk about some of the dangers of lead in consuming it. So it's a heavy metal, and it's very dangerous when ingested, and it can cause physical issues and infertility. But the main risk is brain damage. It can lead to intellectual disabilities in people who consume it. And then if they have kids, it can be passed on. It kind of stays in the system. It's hard to get out. It can cause skin issues. So like, I've seen videos of people in Flint reporting like what the lead is doing to them. And they say like when they shower, it like burns their skin. So that's one of the more minor things, but still a side effect of the lead. And unfortunately, these side effects usually happen to people of color, and they face the side effects of lead more because, as Ellen talked about, the whole race thing, it's happening in Flint, and Flint, Michigan is mainly African American people, where the whole lead crisis is kind of focused, and people who are kind of closer to the poverty rate, usually in Flint. So because of that, they can't like pay to have their pipes fixed, and the city isn't doing it for them. So they have to just live with it, and that's why that statistic happens. And then I'm going to talk about lead paint a little bit. It's kind of a little off topic, but I just wanted to mention it because it has to do with the whole lead thing. So it peels really easily, and it's actually not allowed anymore, but when our parents were kids, it was. So if you've heard stories of like people eating lead paint and then getting sick, it does the same thing as the water. It affects the body in a negative way. So yeah, that's really what lead does. In Flint specifically, the water is going through the pipes where the lead is. So it's not really, wildlife isn't really a big focus. But say you have a dog. The dog drinks the water, dog's gonna get sick. It happens the same way as does humans and animals. It affects them negatively. So oil, not good either. And oil is really the big thing that plays on wildlife. Unfortunately, this picture up here of that bird coated in oil is from an oil spill a couple of years ago. And it's really hard to get the oil off animals and wildlife because it sticks to their feathers and their fur and stuff. So what people have to do is volunteer to like scrub them clean because the oil, it like sticks to them. It's hard to get off. Sometimes they like drink the water with the oil in it, or like fish. It kills them, so that's not good. And plant life along the coastline. gets kind of like suffocated, and they can, the plant can like die, basically. And then that affects the food chain. And then also, because of the whole fish thing, the littlest fish, they ingest the oil, and then the biggest fish, they do too, and that just goes all the way up the food chain and kind of changes the food chain for the worse. And it can sink in rivers, which makes it hard to clean up. It's really heavy. So yeah, those are some effects it has on wildlife and the environment and people. Oh, one more thing, sorry. This wasn't on here, but I wanted to, sorry Ella, I wanted to touch on it because it's a problem with our water today, and we're talking about the right to clean water that's drinkable and usable and safe for everyone. Plastics also play a big part in the whole clean water, not clean water, do I drink it, do I not type of thing, because there's this thing called microplastics that can get through the filters of, the finest filters, the plastics can break up so small that they get through the filters, and then you end up drinking plastic potentially, and it builds up in your system and causes health problems, and it happens to wildlife as well. So something to think about in research. There's a really good movie called A Plastic Ocean, I think. Miss Ferrante has it. You should borrow it, rent it, watch it, if you want to learn more about that.
So I'm going to talk about how all this links to home. I'm going to start out with this map of Maine groundwater. And as you can see, it's in the green. We have quite a lot. And it's not something we think about in our everyday lives, but it's really important for all of us living in Maine that we continue to have that groundwater and that it stays a healthy level. So Poland Springs, as you guys probably know, bottles all of its water from here in Maine, and they have 3 plants total, and last year they bottled 900 million gallons of Maine water. State control is unfortunately limited over what groundwater Poland Springs takes to bottle and sell, so there isn't much they can do if Poland Springs is taking more than people like. They can take unlimited water from the aquifers on land they own, and it's, as of right now, really difficult to know what massive water extraction does to the surrounding environment, because there aren't really studies on it, but residents who live near extraction sites have complained that their personal wells have dried up, and it's unknown whether or not Poland Springs is the cause, but it's highly likely. And during droughts especially, the groundwater needs to stay at a safe level because groundwater and surface water are linked. So in dry periods, groundwater flows out to the surface water, which allows streams to continue to flow, which plays a really important role in all of Maine's water supplies. And so during the droughts, it's likely that taking groundwater will dry up the wells and deplete the streams. Residents in rural Maine especially use direct groundwater for drinking, farming, and more uses. It's 40% of Maine citizens use a private groundwater well for their household water supply. So the Freiburg Poland Springs plant recently faced a lawsuit as the Freiburg residents felt that their water supply was at risk from the massive amount of extraction taking place. And to them, it's more important for the water to serve the needs of locals than to be shipped globally in bottles. And unfortunately, Poland Springs won the case because Freiburg Water Company's contract with them was completely legal. But while Poland Springs profits, locals feel like their water is rightfully theirs and shouldn't make money for a huge company like Poland Springs. Recently, a charter that allowed Poland Springs to take unlimited water for free changed to offer the towns a small sum of money and capped their extraction at 600 million gallons. However, this massive sale of Maine groundwater still angers many locals because in their minds, the money doesn't make up for what is being taken from them. And I think we should protect these groundwater resources for the communities here in Maine and not give them out to the multinational corporation that comes in, takes it out for free and bottles it. And this isn't an immediate crisis like Flint, Michigan, but it raises a really important question of who owns Maine water. Poland Springs intends to build another extraction plant, possibly in the Lincoln area, which would extract another 175 million gallons a year. And next time you buy water bottled from local aquifers, you should think about whether or not it's something you have to pay for.
Okay, so after Erica does a demonstration, we have 2 letters that you guys can sign. They are going to the governor of North Dakota and the governor of Michigan. And then we also have a donation jar that's going to the Flint Water Fund and the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. And obviously you don't have to sign them, you don't have to donate, but if you're looking for a way to make a difference, this is a good way to start. So now Erica has a demonstration.
Fuck you, you said plenty of time after class. Stop! I'm going back to class.
Okay, so now we're gonna have a little conversation, audience talk back, dialogue, questions, whatever you want to call it. We're gonna kind of base it off what we do at camp, seeds. So just some rules or like for dialogue are just to, I don't really think we're gonna have issues here, but I just have to list out the rules before dialogue happens. Everyone needs to at least have some respect for people speaking. You don't have to agree with what someone's saying, but there's no reason to like rudely disagree. You can disagree in a calm, collective manner. Like I said before, I don't think we're gonna have any issues with this, but I just wanted to make sure. And just please, one person at a time. So yeah, so this is just an opportunity for you to share your thoughts on what we just presented, stuff you liked, stuff you didn't, ask questions. If you have ideas on how South Portland as a school can help, this is your time.
Yes.
Just speak really loudly and just raise your hand before you speak. Does anyone have any questions to start?
Tough crowd. Should have expected this.
Are they working on making the water crossing